Okay, so please visit our YouTube channel, hit subscribe and smash that like button and click the bell to get all our new content. That really helps us out. You can find us on YouTube. Just search for Animal Activism Mentorship. And stay until the end for more info on donating to AAM. So welcome to another educational and inspiring AAM program. This entitled, You Can Teach an Old Dog New Tricks, Going Vegan Later in Life. Growing up in an all-female Italian household, Eric Lindstrom was nourished to obesity on meat and dairy. Decades later, overnight, Lindstrom became a vegan on a bet he still refuses to lose 10 years later. This simple change in diet and lifestyle led to a popular blog that led to 2 book deals, 2 YouTube shows, and ultimately a career in animal rights. This presentation will encourage anyone at any age to make the change to vegan for physical health, the planet, and of course, the animals. So my name is Michelle Granberg. I'm your moderator. I'm a mentor and team member with Animal Activism Mentorship. I'm located in New Jersey, and I've been vegan and an activist for over 6 years. Our mission at AAM is to empower activists to boldly act and equip them with what they need to fight for animal liberation. AAM is a free multinational program supporting new and fledgling animal rights activists to reach their full potential. Founded in 2020, AAM offers a free 3-month mentorship program which pairs experienced activists with aspiring activists. Through one-on-one mentoring, we generate an increased number of effective activists worldwide because we know this movement needs more activists. Additionally, we offer free workshops that train and educate our mentors, mentees, and the public. We have a podcast called the Animal Liberation Hour, and we host large-scale in-person activism events around the country. AAM is proud to be fueled by FARM, the Farm to Animal Rights Movement, one of the oldest AR organizations in the country. If you're interested in becoming a mentor or mentee or want to get involved or to donate, please visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com, and follow both AAM and FARM on social media. With that being said, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. In his role as executive director, Eric Lindstrom manages FARM's personnel, fundraising, coordinating partner networks, budgeting, and operations. After founding a New York-based vegan, socially conscious advertising and marketing firm, Lindstrom officially started his career in the animal rights movement as the program director for FARM, and then served as the director of marketing and communications for Animal Outlook, formerly Compassion Over Killing, where he led the team toward a successful rebranding of the decades-old organization. Residing in Ithaca, New York, Lindstrom penned 2 best-selling books on veganism, The Skeptical Vegan and Raising Vegan Kids, both published through Skyhorse Publishing. Yeah, so I'm going to turn it over to Eric, and we are going to have a Q&A portion after Eric is complete with his presentation. So hold your questions, and we'll call for them then. Thanks so much. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that great introduction. I hope I don't repeat most of what you said. I do have to update that, though, because this year will be my 11th year as a vegan, and I still have not suffered from any protein deficiency. So I don't know what that's about. But yes, thank you so much for having me today, and thank you for all AAM does. So when I do this talk normally, or have done it in the past live, I have an opportunity to do a quick survey of the audience to ask who identifies as vegan. And they'll raise their hands. I'll ask some, who identifies as vegetarian. A few other hands may reluctantly go up. And then I'll ask who identifies as omnivore. And if there's a brave person in the audience who, amongst vegans and vegetarians and others who maybe are at a veg fest or some other talk I'm doing, if they'll raise their hand, they actually get a free book. They win the book. And because my point is, I was that person. I was the last person you would ever expect to go vegan. As you said, I was raised by my mom and my nana, Italian household. And I had pretty much growing up eaten every animal. Alphabetically speaking, anchovies, bear, chickens and cows, deer. I never ate an eagle but I did eat an elk, frogs and goats, halibut, insects, jackrabbits, kangaroos, lobsters, mosquitoes. That wasn't on purpose. It was because I was riding my motorcycle. Nurse sharks, ostriches, pigs, even quail, in case you were thinking there was no letter Q for food. Rabbit, snakes, turtle, unicorns, which taste like chicken, veal, walleye, there was nothing for X, yellowfin tuna, and zebra mussels. So I had eaten pretty much every animal on the planet. And I was, again, as I said, the last person you would ever expect to go vegan. I enjoyed eating meat. It was a huge part of my identity. It was part of my every meal. And if there was no meat included with the dish, I would actually ask for meat on the side. And then 11 years ago, my wife, who has celiac and was already suffering from what I call LIDS, lactose intolerance denial syndrome, she came home and declared that in January 2012, she was going to go vegan for 30 days. Half listening, as I'm known to do, I agreed to do it with her. I'm still not sure why. Maybe at that point, I was starting to feel all of the 4+ decades of age and thought a change might be good. Maybe I knew deep down that I should think more about what I was eating and possibly not set another local record for eating the most chicken wings in one sitting. That was 68. I ate 68 chicken wings at once. That's 34 birds in one meal. So January 2012 rolls around. We're flying back from vacation, passing through the airport in Newark. And Jen pointed out at one of the airport restaurants, a banner that said, all you can eat chicken wings for $11.99. And she said, here's your last chance. And I declined. Again, not entirely sure why, but that was it. I had made that decision at that moment. And on January 6, 2012, I was committed to trying vegan for just 30 days. Based loosely on the book by Colleen Patrick Goudreau, which I highly recommend for new vegans, I was ready. I was hopeful that after 30 days, Jen would go back to eating cheese, since cheese is literally addictive, and I could return to my animal alphabet soup. But that didn't happen. What did happen was I started a blog, The Meaty Vegan. That blog was meant to document my failed attempt at going vegan. A mix of trials and tribulations and poignant parody. The blog soon took off and garnered a following, which ultimately caught the attention of a New York City publisher. Kim Lim from Skyhorse Publishing was tasked with finding the next Thug Kitchen. At the time, it was a runaway bestseller. The cookbook combined vegan recipes with some, let's say, adult language in their instructions. In her search to find a book with some meat to it, Kim typed in meaty and vegan, and the rest is history. She found my blog. A year later, The Skeptical Vegan was born. Excuse me. So after surviving those first 30 days, struggling to find food in vending machines and at gas stations, I remember saying to some of my new vegan friends that there just aren't as many vegan food options available to vegans as there are to carnivores. He asked me to cite an example, and I said, well, walk up to any vending machine, and you'll see there are far more options that aren't vegan. To which, of course, he replied, why are you eating from a vending machine? So within those first 30 days, I realized that I was feeling better, lighter, less lethargic. So on day 31, I turned the challenge into a bet that 11 years later, as you said, remains the bet I refuse to lose. So how did my first year as a vegan impact my life? Well, I did lose a total of 30 pounds after going vegan. Of course, I've gained most of that back, thanks mostly because of vegan mayo. I did a 23andMe test, and I found out that 85% of my DNA is actually vegan mayo. There are so many incredible options today, it's almost impossible to avoid gaining some weight. My doctor's visits were shockingly good. I can remember Dr. Yoon, after reviewing my charts, saying, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I soon discovered that I had more stamina in more than one department, which led to a surprise baby at 45, which led to book number 2, Raising Vegan Kids. So I soon gained a following of more than 40,000 people across all social media channels. And that's when I took my passion for marketing to the next level, as you mentioned in the introduction, by starting a vegan design and marketing firm. Think Tank Creative's first clients included Miyoko's Kitchen, T. Colin Campbell, the Remedy Food Project, and Plant Pure Nation, among others. A lot of the early accounts that I had been working for as a new vegan in advertising were the Whole Foods plant-based communities. It had less to do with animal rights at that point. I launched 2 YouTube channels, Give Peas a Chance and The Skeptical Vegan. And then that career in animal rights as Director of Marketing and Communications at Animal Outlook, formerly Compassion Over Killing, and now as the Executive Director of Farm Animal Rights Movement, the nation's first animal rights not-for-profit dedicated to ending the use of animals for food. So for those of you who don't know, Farm's programming to end the use of animals for food has spanned nearly 5 decades and reaches millions around the world every year. From Meat Out in March, which was started in 1983, to World Day for Farmed Animals, which happens in October, started in 1985. Farm's dedication to the animals is unwavering. Our outreach, events, and demonstrations continue to change minds and menus. And as you know, we've had the unbelievable fortune of aligning ourselves with AAM, which has put boots back on the streets during and after the pandemic and doing some actions that are just absolutely admirable for the animals. So we appreciate so much of what AAM does, and Farm has continued to be a huge supporter of your work. So to say going vegan changed my life is an understatement. At this point in my talk, this is where I always get really emotional. I try not to cry, but at this point, I point out a grim figure, as if other arguments for going vegan aren't enough. Since I started this talk, there have been more than 2,800,000 animals killed for food in the US alone. This figure even becomes more shocking when you stretch that out to 23 million per day. According to one estimate, 200 million land animals are slaughtered around the world every single day, needlessly. If we were killing humans at this rate that we were killing animals worldwide, the entire population of the planet would be wiped out in 17 days. Don't get me started on the dairy industry. Just earlier this year, I'm sure you all saw the news out of Texas of a barn fire on a dairy farm, killing 18,000 cows. These were dairy cows that, of course, were artificially inseminated to be impregnated, to lactate, to give birth to offspring that are ultimately taken from them. The dairy industry is a dying industry, we all hope, and it is about time that it dies. And then there's Mother Earth, of course. Scientists right now are funded to the tune of $20 million per year to come up with ways to rebuild the Arctic ice caps. So far, they've presented floating sand that would be sprayed over the ocean to reflect the sun's rays back into space. Or another idea involves pumping ocean water back up to the surface during the winter so it freezes when the water temperatures reach 50 below zero. Not once suggesting that going plant-based will also help rebuild the polar ice cap. And the pollution and waste. Last year, it was reported that Smithville Farms is responsible for spilling nearly 7.5 million gallons of hog waste across the state of Missouri. This waste enters not only the water table that humans rely on, but spills into other rivers and tributaries, affecting and killing even more wildlife. Animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change, and free range and cage-free aren't free at all. These are just marketing terms meant to make consumers feel better about their purchases. So during my own journey, vegan journey to where I am today, starting off, as I said, more in the Whole Foods plant-based direction and leaning into now ethical veganism, I can distinctly remember, and this is why I encourage others to try veganism for 30 days, to find options for possible food replacements that would make them feel satiated and then replace items in their diets that they might think they're missing. At a certain point, you will make a connection. And that's what this is all about to me, is that I was, again, the most unlikely person to ever go vegan. And now my reasons for being vegan are so obvious and so life-changing that I could never go back. I can remember I did a talk just a couple of weeks ago, and a woman asked the question, how do you deal with cravings, meaning meat cravings? And she was a new vegan, so it was understandable, these questions arise. And I told her that they don't exist anymore. They're impossible to exist. The idea of consuming an animal is an absolute impossible thought to me. And so the cravings aren't there. And meanwhile, as I said, you find so many replacements that fill some of those voids that that you're not even thinking about ever eating animals again. So hopefully people make it to that point. So all of the points I've been making about why vegan and why I went vegan are points that drive us every day at Farm, which keep us motivated. And I keep using this phrase of, I'm so lucky I get to do what I do every day, come in and come up with new strategies, help with programs, deal with our amazing team at Farm to get people to leave animals off their plates. But at the same time, this is a job that we all don't want to be doing, that we hope we'll be out of business one day, where we don't have to fight so hard for the lives of these animals. So why would anyone continue to eat animals when there are these alternatives? So for meat, for example, and I know many of you on this meeting will know about all of these products, but there's, of course, Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods, Gardein, Tofurkey, Light Life, Morningstar. There's a company out of Japan that reached out to me and sent sample products called Next Meats, and they're hoping to break into the US market. And these were some of the most convincing and delicious thin sliced meats I'd ever tried. And so that's one other new product that's going to be out hopefully this year. Of course, cheeses. BioLife will always remain true to my heart. I discovered it when I was in London before it even made it to the US. Miyoko's, Daya, Treeline, Chow. There's a company called Sparrow Foods, which was started by a Cornell alum friend of mine. They make these delicious cheeses out of pepitos, which are pumpkin seeds. So again, they're finding out new ways to make new products out of existing plant-based ingredients. There's dairy, of course. There's Silk, Almond Breeze, Ripple, Good Karma. There's actually a milk made out of potatoes called Sprout, which I think is a very clever name. Ice creams, So Delicious, Oatly, Nadamu. Even Ben & Jerry's is in the game, which seems very unlikely or unexpected considering their ties to Vermont and dairy. Eggs, Just Egg, Veg. There's another company called Pegs that's made with chickpeas. But these are all easy replacements for the foods that you may be giving up to go vegan. They're all delicious and affordable and readily available. Little reminder at this point, again, this is going back to my Whole Foods plant-based background, but a plant-based diet is optimum for all stages of human health. There should no longer be a question about that at all. Contrary to what meat eaters might tell you, and it's amazing how meat eaters suddenly become nutritionists as soon as you tell them you're vegan, all plants have protein, and all plants have the protein you need. Have you ever seen a cow eat a steak? A moose can stand 9 feet tall, grow antlers 7 feet wide that are made up of calcium and protein, and they shed and regrow these antlers every year, all while eating nothing but plants. I remember when I first went vegan, I asked a raw vegan, what does she think about protein? And she replied, I don't. So that's kind of what I do now. Eat a variety of whole foods and plants and your body will thrive. The best time to go vegan was yesterday, but since that's impossible, the next best time is today. The only regret vegans have is that they didn't do it sooner. So if any of you who may not be vegan or know someone who isn't vegan and they feel like it might be too late to change, it isn't. Or if they say it's too difficult, it isn't. Vegan food is everywhere, alphabetically speaking. Avocados, Beyond Burgers, cauliflower wings. Is there anything they can't do with cauliflower? Daya cheese and pizza, edamame, French fries, Gardein fish fillets, home fries, ice cream, jackfruit, kale, lasagna, mayo, so much vegan mayo, nachos and nuggets, oat milk, and a million other plant-based milks, pesto, quinoa, ramen, seitan, tacos, udon noodles, vegetables, waffles, xanthan gum, which isn't really a food, but it is an ingredient, and yogurt. I also wanted to tuck nutritional yeast under Y because, of course, vegans love their nutritional yeast. And then zucchini noodles, also known as zoodles. When someone asks me for vegan recipes, I simply tell them to find the recipe they want and make it using vegan plant-based ingredients. There is a substitute for literally everything, and they're available everywhere. Vegan food is here in countless restaurants and groceries and even fast food chains. But let me remind everyone, of course, most of you all know on this call, that vegan isn't a diet. It's a lifestyle. Yes, vegans abstain from consuming animals and their products in the form of food. This extends to clothing and cosmetics. Vegans won't purchase or use products tested on animals. Vegans do not attend or support events or industries that exploit animals, such as rodeos, circuses, aquariums, and zoos. These things have nothing to do with dieting. So for those of you who are already vegan, what more can you do? Volunteer at farmed animal sanctuaries, which we have a guest today who runs a sanctuary, and volunteer for animal rights organizations like AAM, or go to farmusa.org volunteer to sign up for any of our upcoming demonstrations or events. If you're able, make donations to organizations aligned with your ideology. Hold demonstrations and table at places where you can reach the most people with a message of veganism. Hand out plant-based food samples. Host potlucks. Be sure to invite your non-vegan and veg-curious friends. Challenge your friends to go vegan and support them with programs like Challenge 22, 10 Weeks Vegan, and Veganuary. Wear your vegan messaging on your laptop, embody shirts, socks, tattoos. Post vegan food porn on social media. I think I have probably converted more people toward a plant-based diet based strictly on the photos that I post on Instagram. They're amazed and a little bit surprised at the variety of foods that you can make from plants. Support plant-based options at fast food restaurants. You don't have to eat there. You don't have to do that yourself, but please support them. And encourage your local restaurants to offer vegan and plant-based options. Most importantly, know that a message of kindness and support will go further than pressure and guilt. Be there for your family and friends and show them how amazing vegan tastes and feels. I want you to try something as you're thinking about this. Replace the word vegan with kind to animals. So the next time someone says, I could never go vegan, I love cheese too much. Or people who are vegan are weird. Replace the word vegan with kind to animals. We strive for a world where every earthling has a right to live and grow. That's why we don't eat animals. It's a quote by Ruby Roth, who has illustrated our latest coloring book, My Farm Friends. And I thank you so much again for being here. If I helped convince any one or two of you to go vegan, or might have convinced someone with you or a friend or family member to go vegan, then my work here is done, and so is my talk. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. That was so good. I'm so glad you covered all of that. That was lovely to hear again, and just so validating and inspiring.
Good.
So now we want to hear from y'all there here with us with some questions for Eric, or comments, or certainly if you want to share a bit, not too much though, about your story or what this brings up for you, what this reminds you of, what this making you think of, anything to add in terms of other ways we can reach pre-vegans, or what worked for you. What made you do it? What made you go? What made you tip over into veganism? So if you want to put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you, or if you'd like to click the hand raise icon. Anybody? Oh, go ahead, Shamira. Go ahead and unmute.
Okay. I went vegan. I started out as a vegetarian, but it was because of an article that I read in a magazine at the ripe age of 40 that talked about animal agriculture and the abuse of animals. And I was appalled. I mean, I'd spent all those years before oblivious to it. And then I spent the next 12 years being a vegetarian. And then I attended Summerfest, and I attended one of Karen Davis's events where she was talking about chickens. And I thought, well, you know, I love eggs. What's wrong with eating eggs? And I left her session a vegan.
Wow, that's a great.
It was just, yeah, it was just new information. And again, I was appalled at how horribly animals are treated in the food process. And, you know, being part of farm now, these almost 20 years, just how we abuse all animals. It's the food industry, it's vivisection, it's clothing, it's just everywhere. It's so unbelievably horrible. Anyway, thank you for what you're doing to make people more aware, and I'm proud to be part of farm and what farm does to also make people aware and offer them options that make a difference.
We know, I mean, you know how much we love you, Shamira, so I'll just start by saying we love you. And I hadn't mentioned in my talk, but I did also attend Summerfest very, very early on. So if I went vegan in January, Summerfest is held the first weekend in July, right around July 4th. And so at Summerfest, which is happening this year, by the way, in just a couple of weeks, I met Dr. Greger, I met Dr. Esselstyn, I met Dr. Campbell for the first time. Similarly, I attended talks with Dr. Milton Mills, who used me as an example of how we humans are not predators, that we are not carnivores, we're not meat eaters, we're much more herbivores, and you know, we graze. So he put me up on the stage, and he made a demonstration where he showed he couldn't take me down. He couldn't tackle me because he doesn't have the haunches, he doesn't have the claws, and he doesn't have the teeth that would allow a carnivore to tear down its you know, food. So at Summerfest, you know, it was, I think, 4 days of just inspirational talks, amazing food, amazing plant-based food for the first time. So, you know, again, I probably the majority of the people on this call are vegan, and at a minimum vegetarian, and quite possibly know a lot of vegans. But I would say that, you know, a big part of sticking to it is finding a community. And I'm lucky enough that my community was real. It was, you know, actual people. Where I live, there's a lot of vegans. When we host vegan potlucks or Thanksgiving meals, 20 or 30 people will show up. So finding a community will definitely help you on your journey, and aligning yourself with organizations who you might be able to volunteer for, or finding out information about how their work is effective and how you can be part of it. Getting involved will definitely help you stick to the plan.
So we do have some questions, Eric, that I'm going to give to you. And I just want to, you've already spoken some great names of some great leading edge folks, vegan voices in our movement. And if anybody wants to share who inspired you, what vegan voice up on a stage or behind a book or in a video inspired you, so we can follow them, feel free to share that. We've had Karen Davis here doing several workshops, and definitely she speaks to the plight of chickens so well. So the question from Tenebrae in the chat is, what do you tell an elderly relative who might say, I'm too old to change, right? That's your talk. What what would you say to them or show them?
Yeah, well, I hope sort of what I said, resonated, that it's never too late to change, that, making change is a decision that you need to take onto yourself and pursue, because you want to do it. You can't tell someone to stop smoking, for example. They need to want to do it on their own. It's sort of the same with going vegan and switching to a plant-based diet. My probably a good example is my mom just turned 81 last week. And while she's not vegan, she has understood more and more how important veganism is to me. And my older sister's vegan. A lot of our, family members are vegan or vegetarian. And she knows all of the points that, I've made in my talk, and she knows the reasons why you would go vegan. She's also someone who has now switched over to all the plant-based milks, to Beyond Burgers. Like whenever she hosts a cookout, she actually prefers those alternatives. So I think, the advice would be, if you're talking primarily diet, it would be preparing meals and snacks and appetizers, sort of like finger foods that are just obviously delicious, that are vegan, and just to show that you don't have to eat animals, you don't have to eat animal byproduct. You get to a certain point, I think, in age where maybe changing is not only a difficult thing because you've been doing it for so long, but you sort of figure, well, I've made it this far, why change? That's where the argument for the animals and or the environment might come in. But, really, for me, again, it's a really simple decision to not eat animals at this point, and convince others that when they say I just eat a little meat, I will reply with, well, one bite of any meat is still an entire dead animal. So, it's tough. Again, I want to make sure that you allow them the space to explore it themselves, but provide them the tools and quite possibly the food to help them.
Another question is, what's the hardest part about raising vegan kids? Or I might add to that, what's the easiest part?
Oh my gosh, there's so many hard parts. So when I wrote the second book, as I said, we had a baby. So we had adopted our son, and then my wife got pregnant with our second. And at that point, we realized we were suddenly going to be raising vegan kids. And so it was a perfect opportunity for the publisher to ask me to write a book about raising vegan kids, which, by the way, has sold more than the first book. So there's a market out there. That book is a compilation of 12 different families, mixed families, blended families that we know who all are raising vegan kids. So it's their stories first, and then my sort of comments in between each of the chapters or in between each of the stories. And every one of them has had a challenge. The major challenges are always parties, other kids' parties or other kids' play dates where there may not be vegan options. And then, of course, things like holidays, especially Halloween. So some of the, tricks are in my book, but some of the tricks, like for parties, of course, is bringing your own food, bringing your own cupcakes that are vegan. I remember this one time we brought this giant vegan pizza for myself, my wife, and our two kids. And then, of course, it turned out all of the lactose intolerance kids came running over and attacked our box of pizza. So we're not just doing it for the animals or for veganism, we're doing it for lactose intolerant kids, for the ones who can't eat regular cheese. So we were actually providing a service to this particular party by bringing our own vegan food. With Halloween, we do something called the Switch Witch, where the kids will dump out all of their candy. We'll sort through the stuff that's not vegan, put it into another container, walk out of the room and say, now the Switch Witch is going to switch your candy. And we'd bring out a similar sized bucket of vegan candy that replaces everything that they had just gotten. So little tricks along the way to deal with the challenges of raising vegan kids. There's the school systems, getting involved in your cafeterias at your schools. For our daycare, we actually went to the corporate headquarters in Connecticut to have them switch all of their facilities over to plant-based milks. So it is extra effort. I mean, parenting itself is a lot of work, but our house is obviously 100% vegan, and our kids are thriving, and they're missing for nothing. I mean, I hate to say how many times we eat macaroni and cheese, but it's just so simple to make, and they love it so much. But these recipes are the same recipes we grew up with, just using vegan and plant-based ingredients.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. I know people are taking notes. If you want to share any of your own favorite resources for folks in the chat, you're welcome to do that. There was a question, again, another question in the chat, which is, sorry. I think it was from Tenebrae about what to say when it comes up, the pushback that comes up, like human elitism, that humans are better, that humans are above animals, that they're just basically that whole "they're just animals" argument. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think each person has their own response to that. I think each person has their own individual perspective and feelings about it. So for me, again, it was within those first 6 months of just trialing going vegan. We did the entire thing. I mean, we got rid of all of the wool, leather, silk, everything out of our house. We went all in on this. And so during that first sort of 6 months, I personally made the connection. I live in upstate New York. There's a lot of dairy farms up here, and I saw cows in the field grazing, seemingly happy at that point. And I realized how similar they were to, my dog or other animals, where they just wanted to be loved, and they, you could walk up to a fence and they'll come up to be, pet or whatever. And so I remember distinctly a number of moments where making that connection made it so obvious to me. And it's not even that I'm, animals have the same rights as humans, or animals, deserve the same freedoms as humans, which I believe they do. It's more that I think that we need to coexist with animals in a peaceful way, that we need to understand that they are sentient, that, whether or not you base it on research or just hunch, that if you interact with a farmed animal, you will clearly see that they are as loving and caring, and they have feelings as much as a companion animal, or more so, I think, in many instances, because they're not sort of accustomed to getting all that extra love. So I think that I would say that for me personally, I feel animals are equals, and that they deserve as much as freedoms as humans do on the planet. Of course, there's an unbelievable number of challenges associated with that. Every time I personally, post something on social media, there's inevitably a person saying, well, what are we going to do with those millions of animals that you're talking about that are currently, being raised or, about to be slaughtered? Do we just let them go? That understanding that these numbers are because of breeding, and that needs to stop, and that it's unnecessary. And I just, it really affects me personally when I think a lot about these animals and what they're subjected to ultimately, their ending. I don't know if that answered the question, but hope it helped.
Yeah, that was great. Another question is food related. What food do you love now as a vegan that you never would have tried? For me, I don't think some of my favorite foods like quinoa, even avocados and nutritional yeast, I never would have tried them and would have thought they would be a regular part of my day-to-day enjoyment.
It's interesting because I probably should have kept some sort of food log during that those early days, and maybe on my blog, which is still up, by the way. If you do a search for Meaty Vegan, you'll get to see all of the old posts about when I was first going vegan. And I think there's a post about Summerfest in there too. But so a lot of those foods, as you mentioned, Michelle, were things that I would never have eaten. And in fact, one of them could be as simple as tofu. We eat a lot of tofu, and I went to Washington, D.C. recently for one of our events and had dinner with relative, and she told me she had never eaten tofu before. Like, she just immediately thought she hated tofu, which to me sounds impossible, but I was probably there. And so I ordered a crispy fried tofu Thai dish and let her try it. And she, of course, thought it was outstanding, delicious, and wonderful, because she maybe hadn't had it prepared a certain way, or didn't understand the versatility of some of these foods. So, I mean, there's the obvious ones like kale, which there's a great story about how kale suddenly became as popular as it is today. And that was because of one woman who discovered that it made a great garnish on the Pizza Hut salad bar. So kale leaves themselves basically look inedible and plastic. And so she discovered, hey, I can just sell it to all of these salad bars across the country, and they'll just fill in the blanks between the foods. So I never would have eaten kale. I'm still not a fan of kale, but I'll tell you, there's a kale recipe for a peanut salad with goju bean. All these things I'm talking about, I wouldn't have eaten. Goju berries in a peanut kale salad. And of course, once the kale is like broken down, when it's massaged, it's delicious. I never would have eaten kale. I still don't like quinoa, just because I feel like it's kind of messy. It always makes a little bit of a mess at those little tiny. We eat a lot of rice, as I said, tofu. There's things that I just never would have expected I would be eating. But mostly it's been me taking all of the old recipes that I used to use for dinner parties and then converting them to vegan recipes. So there's things like the textured vegetable protein, or the soy curls, where you can make a meat-like texture, or meat-like ingredient, and then treat it like it's meat. Like we did these seitan kebabs on the grill, and so we're eating grilled meat. It's barbecue sauce and vegetables, and it's delicious. So a lot of what I continue to eat are the foods that I was eating when I wasn't vegan, but just the plant-based version of it. And then, yes, there are plenty of foods that I never would have thought I would eat back before I was vegan.
Have you ever had anyone sort of question your manliness, that whole thing where meat is associated with men and manliness? I know we've all heard that, but what's your sort of unique response to that? Because that's all advertising and marketing and spin, and you're in, right? You have advertising and marketing background, so you must, I'm going to say, easily respond to that with.
Yeah, it's come up more often than I had hoped. I have, luckily, again, a great network of vegans. And then one layer above that, I have a network of friends who are very, very open about vegan options, about having, when we get together, I'll bring vegan food, they'll try it, we'll order vegan Thai food, and they will, it's delicious. I mean, there's no question Thai food is fantastic vegan. But there are, in that mix, a handful of times that I wouldn't say I've been confronted, but definitely you could see there's a little bit of what they think is funny, or a tongue-in-cheek comment about real men eat meat, that kind of thing, or oh, of course you can't eat that, insinuating that it's less than manly to order the tofu, for example. So when one example is, a friend of mine asked, why am I vegan? In sort of a tone of like, how would you choose that, or why would you choose that? And I've brought it back to just one simple response, and that's that animals are not food. I find that inarguable at this point. I don't think that's an opinion. I truly 100% feel as though animals are not food. And so, I basically counter it by letting them know how I feel personally. And oftentimes that's enough for them to realize that it means a lot to me, what I do, both professionally as well as personally. And then they sort of back off. I'm someone who doesn't engage in that way oftentimes with people who want to, trolls or people who want to start a fight or an argument. I think, again, maybe I consider myself very lucky to live where I live and to have the friends and community that I have, because it doesn't come up that often. But when the book came out, a good friend of mine, Tracy McWhirter, who wrote By Any Means Necessary, and her newest book, which I can't remember the title of right now, but she's amazing. And so when this book came out, she said, finally, someone's written a book from a man's perspective. And so without knowing so, I've probably covered a lot of that in the book, just by saying, this is who I was, this is what I've, decided to do, and this is how I'm thriving now in that regard. So there's probably a lot in the book about me having to confront that. But yeah, the media does not help. Luckily, there are a lot of vegan celebrities and athletes out there now that we can sort of use as a representative of a plant-based diet. Tori Washington always comes to mind. He's a bodybuilder and he's unbelievably fit and he's 100% plant-based. He was responsible for training Chris Hemsworth for one of the Avengers movies. So he's got like definite clout, and he's got the ability to prove that masculinity and or sort of physical athleticism are only improved by a plant-based diet. There's no longer a question, I think, that there's not enough protein in what you're getting, and your recovery is better. All of the things, all the reasons why you'd go on a plant-based diet apply to athletes and to men.
Thank you for that. We'll still take some more questions if anybody has them. We have some time for a few more questions, but I will ask Eric as well a question I always like to ask our guests, which is, how hopeful are you that we'll see a vegan world in our lifetime or thereabouts?
Yeah, our kids. I don't. There's a lot of
We won't
ways
hold you to it. Don't
No,
worry.
I know, of course. There's a lot of ways that you can look at that question, that there's this countdown clock of, that the planet itself is proving that this was not sustainable to begin with, and that, animal agriculture being the leading cause and impact of the climate crisis. So it needs to ease up. We need new technologies to bring out foods that will replace animals so that the planet itself can begin to heal, so that we can actually live on this planet. So setting aside the sort of doomsday clock, I tell my kids, my youngest kids, 10 and 9, that their kids will know a vegan world. So I've given it a number of generations before we actually get to a point where I feel like we will be the majority. We will no longer have to sort of defend ourselves. We may no longer have to defend the animals as we do every day. And that we will get to that point of capacity in plant-based technologies and easing up a lot of, if not all, of the animal agriculture. I think the last chapter in this book is something about the future world, and every restaurant is vegan and it has a couple of meat options. Like everything's reversed. Like we would see a point in time where it's just normalized. And that's I think a lot of what we do is we prove that we can thrive as vegans. We can thrive on plant-based diets. We can encourage others to try it. We can provide tools and resources that'll help them. We are here for them, we as Farm, as AAM, whomever, that all together we can make this happen. And I don't ever want to give up. I don't think that it's too lofty of aspiration. I think that one day we will look at a vegan world, but it may be, a couple of generations from now.
I would like to agree with that and hold that hope. Of course, that's why we're doing what we're doing. We are hopeful and optimistic in that way. Any other questions? There was a question that I'll add to about a couple of your favorite things. Like, what are your favorite vegan documentaries? What's your favorite, inquiring minds want to know, favorite vegan mayo?
All right. So I've stopped watching the documentaries unless there's a new one that comes out, right? So at the time, it was Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, which is sort of now, I think, a little known documentary. It's done by Joe the Juicer. He has an actual last name, but he's an Australian who did this around the country, kind of like, hey, let's all start juicing. It's not really a raw diet, but it was definitely a juice diet. And then a third of the way through the film, he met this trucker who was really ill, and Joe helped him convert basically his very small food area in his truck into making juices, or living on a juice diet. And that really appealed to me because I'm kind of like the same age as Joe in the film, and it seemed like the kind of radical approach I was ready for, like an all-in kind of thing. So Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, and then Cowspiracy were two of the first ones that affected me the most. And then after that, there's, of course, What the Health and Game Changers. I did all the marketing for Plant Pure Nation, which had a huge rollout across the country. That's a film mostly about T. Colin Campbell, but it's also about how Nelson Campbell, one of his sons, started this program in Mebane, North Carolina, to have a whole group of people who were sick go on a 10-day whole foods plant-based diet, and they immediately got better. I mean, if there's anyone on this call, or if you know anyone, or even if you're talking about this elderly person who needs convincing, the right diet, whole foods plant-based diet, which is a little stricter than I do because I'm about to talk about mayo. The whole foods plant-based diet does not include oil and salt, and it's really good for you, and it's the optimum diet, and you can reverse diseases. So that was another film that I was very much a fan of, is Plant Pure Nation. So those are some of the ones. Game Changers is also big. Seaspiracy, the orca, the blackfish, that was crazy. I mean, that's the kind of thing where, again, as I was looking at things from whole foods plant-based perspective, and then sort of like farmed animal perspective, and then just watching blackfish and seeing firsthand what was happening at SeaWorld and other aquariums, and how ridiculous it is of how humans treat these unbelievably beautiful, intelligent animals. That one really affected me too. So those are some of my favorites. So with vegan mayos, there was this in the book, I think I mentioned Just Mayo, which was made then by Hampton Creek, and Just Foods now makes Just Egg. They kind of stopped making the mayo. But at one point, I was living at Cornell University. I was living on campus, and Just Mayo came in and replaced all of the mayo campus-wide with Just Mayo in these gigantic pumps. So you just walk up and pump as much vegan mayo as you want on whatever you were making. They didn't tell anyone. They didn't tell the students. They didn't tell the faculty and staff. It just happened. And I think that's kind of the way to do it. Just, the product was that great. So Just Mayo will always sort of hold a special place in, I think, everyone's heart as far as vegan mayos go. There's a company called Only Plant Based, who is somewhat hard to get a hold of, but they have sent me some of the samples of their vegan mayos, and they're delicious. As you know, is it Hellman's or one of those actually came out with a vegan mayo that they were the ones who were trying to sue Just Mayo for using the word mayo. But that's actually really good too. And then, of course, the old standby is Vegan-A's. They're all, I mean, it's not like I'm eating it with a spoon, but as far as putting it on a sandwich or even making macaroni salad or potato salad, any mayo, I think, is really delicious.
What you say, eating it with a spoon is not a good thing?
I've never done it.
Sometimes I have a bowl of mayo. I might add a little rice or, pasta to that bowl of mayo, but I think it's optional. So I'm kind of right with you. And any other questions, some good suggestions are going on there. And I think we need to get one of these brands to sponsor us because
Yeah, I know, right? All these plugs.
really great shout. What do you think about this whole like humane hoax kind of what's going on in advertising and marketing now as well in terms of these terms that are thrown around that we know are meaningless, like grass fed and free range? And
Yeah.
what have you seen with that from, even from the back end of helping vegan brands
Yeah,
combat that?
it's somewhat infuriating, from my perspective that they're, allowed to sort of dupe the consumers, that they can find ways to use words that are just gentle enough or just sort of meaningful, which means meaningless enough to the consumer that they feel like they're making smart choices. Free range or cage free are two of the big ones, when you realize all that means is they're just put into a giant warehouse instead of a small, cage, and they never see the light of day, and could be even more miserable, to be honest with you. So I think it's a shame that those things are allowed. I know that there's a great video done by Dr. Greger about the egg industry and how, he reads all of the peer-reviewed reports, so you don't have to. But within a lot of the government reports, FDA reports, they talk about, there's handwritten notes about we can't say these words. They have to actually go through and edit what they're saying because it's simply untrue. And so they're finding loopholes. They're finding ways to use these marketing terms to, as I said, make consumers feel better about their choices. But honestly, if you stop and step back or just do a little bit of research, you'll see that they're meaningless. I mean, there's very, very few, if any, that actually improve. Of course, that's a humane perspective, but improve at all the lives of these animals whose ultimate demise is not great anyway.
Yeah. We had Hope Bohannic also do some workshops with us, and she's just edited an anthology called The Humane Hoax. Is there happy meat and, ethical eggs? And
Yeah.
so, so there's that question then from Tenebrae, which is ending ag-gag laws or ending animal agriculture. Any ideas or thoughts or anything that farms doing everything they can, but anything specific you want to report around farms' efforts to address animal agriculture and the ag-gag laws?
Yeah, we leave a lot of that up to Animal Outlook, which is where I came from, and they have undercover investigative teams. I mean, the work they do is absolutely incredible, to get these very, very brave young people employed in animal agriculture industries and arm them with pinhole cameras and other devices to allow us to see what's actually taking place. So while I was in Animal Outlook, we did a lot of that. There was probably, I think, 3 or 4 investigations that broke while I was there. And so I got to know both the investigators who at one point were freed of their duties, meaning they could be seen again as opposed to being undercover. And then, of course, the director of investigations, who remotely needs to manage these brave people and their actions. And then that work ultimately turns into legal action on behalf of Animal Outlook employs a number of attorneys, animal law attorneys and otherwise. Their executive director, Cheryl Leahy, is an attorney. So then they take that to legislative levels where they can bring that right to, Washington, D.C. They can, leverage all of what the undercover investigations have uncovered. So farms work is a little less legislative, a lot less legislative. We are more positioned to assist those types of organizations, as well as have programming that allows for people to give up meat, to support them in their decision. So yeah, farms wheelhouse does not really include a lot of changes to laws, but eventually, that could be something that we get more into.
Yeah. So how about your thoughts on like street activism in general or specifically, what you might think is the most effective, just in your experience, of course, or, any words of wisdom or tips for those of us trying to do street activism daily on a regular basis out there?
Yeah, that's a big part of what farms, effectiveness is outreach and grassroots programming and tabling and demonstrations and things like that. Whether it's considered old school at this point, things like leafleting, banner drops. We did this living billboard thing where we just held up massive billboards that can move around. You don't need a permit for it because it's attached to a person. Getting out there with as much educational material in a very succinct manner. We're at the Pride events, Capitol Pride, where some 100,000 people showed up in Washington, D.C. So between leafleting there, having a banner during the parade, our whole theme was Eat the Rainbow. And so we were encouraging people to go plant-based by saying Eat the Rainbow. And we had the words Go Vegan. Each letter was a different colored shirt as part of the march. So that kind of, I don't even want to call it a soft sell, but definitely more approachable approach to veganism and to activism is really where farm shines. It's sort of like in our wheelhouse, and it has been forever, is getting people to stop and talk with us. Meet Out is a big event for us on March 20th every year. We host events. There's events hosted around the world. We go to the Cherry Blossom Festival, hand out vegan jerky and other food samples to people and talk with them about the benefits of going plant-based while handing them informative brochures. So we hope to have a lot more of those coming up in 2024. Now that people are getting out of their forced hibernation, the pandemic, in as much as it's ended, has allowed people to get out there again. So our activism and our street activities, demonstrations and tabling and food sampling is definitely going to ramp up.
You want to tell us about Planet Bethesda?
Oh, yeah.
That's a yearly event that just passed. Tell us about that.
That's a great suggestion to talk about how our activism and messaging gets out there. So Planet Bethesda is in its second year, and it's held in Bethesda, Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C. And it's been billed as the plant-based food festival for people who aren't plant-based. So we had over 40 vendors, 30 some of which were restaurants in the Bethesda and DMV area who aren't necessarily vegan restaurants. I think only a small handful were vegan, but the rest of them were coming there with their best vegan menu item. And so it's, again, attracted a lot of vegans to attend, as any Veg Fest would. But of the 4,000 who came on June 4th, probably 3,500 of them aren't vegan. And we got them, we got their attention. We're showing them that you can eat amazing food in a festival setting without any compromise at all. Plus, we have opportunities to put people like Gene Bauer from Farm Sanctuary up on stage. Congressman Jamie Raskin did a great talk. Gwynn Whitaker was one of the executive producers of Game Changers and a restaurant owner in Virginia. All of these people got an opportunity to talk on stage to an audience who they normally wouldn't be hearing from. And so we're hoping to expand that into 2024 into more events. But we're very happy with the approach, of being able to educate and inform and really entertain so many people who wouldn't otherwise possibly attend a Veg Fest.
Yes. I guess we're open for maybe one final question or so, but Eric, also, how can folks support Farm, and how can they contact you?
Yep.
And did you want to do a book giveaway?
I would love to. Yeah. So go to farmusa.org. That's the best place to go. That has all of the links to all of our programming, has all the links to how to donate, how to volunteer. There'll be links there about Planet Bethesda 2023, a lot of our recent activities, a lot of the programs that we support will be linked there. I mean, we're just doing an absolute unbelievable amount of work. I'm thankful every day for the team that we have. They're committed. They're really great at what they do. Yeah, it's been an incredible couple of years now, a little over 2 years as executive director of Farm. So go to farmusa.org. Yeah, and I wanted to offer up a book. Like I said in the beginning of the talk, what I normally love to do is give it out to the person who's not vegan. Get a name of someone who maybe is vegetarian, maybe someone who said they would never go vegan. I don't know if there's anybody like that on the call. And if not, then you know someone. I mean, this book is perfect for your partner, your spouse, your dad or your grandpa. Just, message Michelle with a compelling reason why you think you can use this book, and we'll send one to you. So I would love, the main thing is to get them out there. It's a shareable book. It's very funny. And it's really the kind of book that you could read it, but you could also gift it. And gifting it is actually even better, because then you're giving it to someone who maybe otherwise wouldn't think about buying this book. So yeah, just message Michelle and
I don't think we have any pre-vegans here actually with us live, but definitely if you want to just private message me in the chat, I guess if you promise, now that it's conditional, promise to share it with a pre-vegan, you have someone who's right
That's a
there.
good way to put it.
And that would be, maybe the thing that would put them over the edge. Private message, the first person to do that will be our winner of Eric's book, The Skeptical Vegan. Okay, we have a winner in the chat. We have a winner already.
Awesome.
Well, I'll take care of that. Any final words, Eric? As I'm going to have a few final announcements, so folks don't go anywhere. If you can hang in there for a few more minutes for some AAM announcements. But Eric, any final words from you as we wrap up?
Just that, thanking AAM as always. I'm so incredibly impressed with all of what you have done. And if anyone has any questions about Farm, by all means, you can email me, eric@farmusa.org. As I said, you can go to the website, farmusa.org, and see links to what we do, the Farm team, all of it should be on that website. And we want to stay in touch, and we want you to get involved. We want to make sure that, we have an opportunity to continue the dialogue and to help each other out. So yeah, Farm would love to support whatever work you're doing in any way we can. And yeah, again, we're so grateful for everyone who's in on this mission with us.
We're grateful as well. We're grateful to be part of Farm, and grateful for all that you're doing individually and as an organization. And thank you for all your words today. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here, folks, but hang on for a couple of quick announcements, please. Upcoming workshops on July 13th, we have communication skills and coping tools for activists. And on July 20th, we have the Turning Point in the Animal Freedom Movement with Robert Grillo. And more workshops to be announced. And again, please check out our previous workshops. They're all archived on our YouTube channel, and subscribe while you're there. And I'd like to announce our 2023 live events coming up. Colorado Convergence is taking place in and around Denver. The dates are June 24th through July 1st. So the time to register is now. The Portland, Oregon Convergence is August 4th through the 12th. And the Ohio Occurrence is September 1st through 3rd in and around Cincinnati. No experience is required, but registration is required. So you'll find the events on our Facebook page and website, and maybe Trey will put the pages or the events in the chat here. You're welcome to share your Instagram handle in the chat as well. Anybody who would like to do that, to share it with one another. Please consider becoming a patron by finding AAM on Patreon. Your donations to AAM allow us to continue to provide free educational resources for activists, which ultimately saves more animals. So that wraps up another AAM workshop. Thank you, Eric, again, for your time and wisdom. Thank you, Trey, for running the technical back end. Thank you all for being here and the tireless work you're doing for the animals. If you're interested in becoming a mentor, mentee, or to get involved, please reach out to us. If you'd like to be on our email newsletter list, drop your email in the chat. And until next time, stay strong, everyone, and live vegan.